Have you ever wondered if people can pick up on your social class identity just by overhearing a conversation you're having with somebody else? Researchers checked this out. And while I'll share the deets, I did not need a study to tell me this. I remember my Ph.D. advisor teaching me qualitative interviewing techniques, and she said that no matter what these people tell you when you're interviewing people from low income backgrounds, remember, they might say something shocking, like that they eat squirrel. And I laughed without thinking and said, I've eaten squirrel. And then she showed me what it looked like to not have a surprised look on your face. Kind of. Back to the study. Researchers developed short conversational vignettes that the researchers performed in front of people and asked them what the class of the listener was. And they ran a pilot study to make sure the vignettes were interpreted as more rich people things or poor people things. And so, for example, some rich people things were talking about what business class experience is like, while poor people things were more going through the financial aid system. And in the conversations, the person gave either a basic explanation of what they were talking about, the basic explanation of financial aid or a basic explanation of business class, or they give a neutral explanation, which is where they assumed a common understanding of like, oh, you know how it is. And when the basic explanation was given, study participants assumed that the listener was not of the same social class. So if the vignette was about flying business class and the person gave a basic explanation, they assumed the listener was from a poorer background. But if the topic was about financial aid and that person needed a basic explanation, they assumed that person was from a higher class since they weren't familiar with it. So this study showed that people infer social class identity not just from what is said, but how it is explained. Because people didn't infer social class from a neutral explanation that assumed shared understanding. So these findings have significant implications. The way you give feedback could influence how people perceive that listener. So if you're a manager at work, if you assume someone doesn't have an understanding, other people could stigmatize them and assume they are from a lower status. This is also an example of how hard it is to integrate into an elite environment if you are from a working class background, no matter how hard you've worked or how lucky you've gotten. In my study on the unwritten rules of work for people from low income backgrounds, one of the unwritten rules was learning how to speak indirectly. And it's really frustrating for people from working class backgrounds who tend to be more direct and to the point. With this study in mind, do you think that maybe part of the indirect communication we see in corporate culture is because people are assuming that you have a shared understanding? Do findings like these make you afraid of the stigma of an explanation, or would you still want one? Finally, how do you think we can provide feedback that reduces miscommunications, because that's a number one business problem, but doesn't promote stigma? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. I'll look forward to it.